So we're at the end of the day, right? I just wanted to remind you that we're at the end of the day. And thank you very much to a colleague, Vasiti from Fiji. This is the back-to-back, the third one.
I need a reward after this.
Yeah, you need a reward. And thank you very much for everyone's patience for being here with us the entire day. I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to skip any opening remarks from my end because even if I would have mentioned that, that would be a repetition of what all of the previous moderators have done today morning. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten this session now because I believe there's already 7 hours of discussion. We have covered a lot of this. But what I will stay with the script that we had discussed. But I would like to seek the help of my panel members and also all the IRP steering committee members who are here in the room and may not have gotten a chance to speak to help us funnel a bit this discussion around what are some of the opportunities to scale up progress. So we'll go on that track. I'm going to give the floor to all of my IRP steering committee members. And the third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Yuchi-san, Steve and Keiko-san to give us a bit of a summary on what was discussed in the parallel roundtables because everybody did not get a chance to be present in all of the sessions. So staying to the script, trying to shorten, and asking for your help to help us see what would be the next step. How can we take that jump from all the challenges, barriers, and opportunities that you have heard throughout the day that has been discussed. And what do you see as some of the steps that needs to be taken, both from a global perspective, a regional perspective, and maybe from a country perspective? So with that, I'll take this opportunity to introduce my esteemed panel members. On my left, I have Mr. Mustapha Habib Ahmed, the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency of Nigeria. On his left, I have our dear colleague, Ms. Makiko OHASHI, the Director in charge of International Cooperation of the Disaster Management Bureau from the Cabinet Office of Japan. To her left, I have Ms. Vasiti Soko, the Director, National Emergency Management Office of Fiji. And to her left, I have Mr. Minack, the First Assistant Coordinator General, Programs and Policy Division, National Emergency Management Agency, Australia. One thing we have kept across all these sessions earlier in the morning, which was to hear from our panelists on what do they mean as resilient recovery for their country or for their ministries. Maybe I'll omit it for Vasiti, and unless Andrew, you wanted to add anything further to what Melissa has already mentioned. Maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Mustapha. What does it mean for you to be for resilient recovery?
As mentioned by various presenters in this forum, building back better is easier said than done, especially in the face of growing rate of disasters with increasing severity. From Nigeria's perspective, we have over the years strived hard to build a critical mass of experts in the field of disaster management and building back better. This we have done through NEMA partnership with 6 universities. NEMA has set up a department of disaster management agency, collaborated with university. We have set up disaster management department. It's like a course in 6 major universities in 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. We offer courses from diploma up to PhD. Why we are doing this is so that we can equip and train people capacity from the grassroots. Because most of the challenge we have, Nigeria has a population of over 222 million people. And the challenge we have in the grassroots is capacity. So that's why we set up 6 institutions with Department of Disaster Management. And not only equip them, finance them, we also installed weather observation system in all the 6 universities. So those who graduate from there, we expect them to also join the local emergency management committees, the state government, state emergency management agencies, and also to work with NEMA, National Emergency Management Agency, and other fields. I think I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. So building capacity from the cadre all the way up
Yes.
to work with you when the crisis strikes in. Maybe to Ms. OHASHI, would you like to see how does Japan see as resilient recovery?
Yes, for the country like Japan, which is hit by a mega disaster in such a high frequency, I think that it literally means readiness for the next disaster. Particularly, you may all know that climate disasters tend to hit the same place repeatedly. So we have to really be ready for the next disaster by the time we start rehabilitation. Even it happens to the earthquake also, that it could revisit, like we had this month in Noto Peninsula. They had a mega earthquake back in 2007, and now it revisited. So, so recovery needs to be sort of designed in a way that it can stand the same level or the worst level of disaster next time. And now that we're entering in the era that there are such frequent disaster anywhere in the world, it's not just a public affairs just surrounding infrastructure reconstruction, but it's now coming into the more with the community affairs. Community tend to maybe focus on preparedness to protect themselves when disaster hits. But probably we need to involve more communities more in the way that they have their own advanced visions of recovery when they are hit with mega disaster in particular, like imagining that what we can do if our town is washed away with flood or our business is completely killed by earthquake or something. It's cruel, but maybe that's the way that the sort of recovery designing should be in these times. Thank you.
No, thank you. So it's preparing for the worst case scenario, building the resilience of the communities, and business continuity as a requirement and not just a wish in itself. Right? Thank you. Would you like to add anything from what you may have mentioned in the morning?
Thank you, Moderator. I'm sitting here trying to think of things that I have not said so I can see. But one that comes across my mind right now is, whatever we do, because we talk about disaster preparedness, there's a lot of initiatives that comes in that space. One of it, Fiji is developing the first anti-participatory action framework for the Pacific. And I was very firm in my early discussions with our UN counterparts is whatever it is, we should never compromise community resilience. Okay? So this anti-participatory action, when we are implementing it, people should not be paid to move to the evacuation center. Absolutely no. People should move to the evacuation center because they know that their lives will be compromised if they remain at home. Okay? So this is something that needs to be stretched, and also at this forum such as this, we need to ensure that all these new initiatives, while we appreciate it, we do appreciate it, we just need to ensure that it does not compromise community resilience, because it's going to create more problem for us, government, to now try, once the project ends, to now try to go back to the community to say, oh, well, we can't give you that money. Obviously, you just need to now do it yourself. The question is going to come back to is, no, you gave us money, you continue to give us money to do that particular level of preparedness. Right. So whatever we do, as we appreciate the work that's done on preparedness, that should never compromise community resilience. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So community resilience at the heart of it. Andrew, would you like to add?
Yeah, I might just make a couple of comments. I found this really interesting. It does strike me, though, we've talked a lot around systems and legislation and funding. What struck me is not much discussion around people and resilience of people in this room and your teams. And if I take a step back and look at the emergency management sector, we have been at capacity for the last 5 or 10 years, and yet if we go forward, it's going to grow further. And one of the great constraints we have from Australia is the resilience of our people. They're very resilient, but there's only so much people can take. And again, if I reflect on the lessons we've learnt from Australia, An example I'd provide was we had an anniversary of a 10-year event, a bad bushfire. It was 10 years past the event, and it was acknowledgement, and there were tears in the room from people who were involved in that event. So when we talk about resilience, it's often decades of rebuilding people's capacity to cope with that type of event. And the issue around welfare and well-being and mental health is essential. And Australia's developed significantly from where we were 5 or 10 years ago. But I just want to call out, I think it's one of the key challenges. We're stretched already with what's on our plate. But if you put on resilience recovery on the top of it, it's another agenda, it's another demand, it's another expectation of the community. And what I'm calling out there is, if you don't look after yourself and you don't look after your people, it doesn't matter what frameworks you have, you'll never get anywhere because you don't have the arms and legs, which are few and far between, to deliver.
Thank you, Andrew. So it's people at the center, community and people at the center of all the process and frameworks. Now, I want to go back to all of you with the next question which I have, and this is where what we want your help in, which is, if you could help us from all the conversations that you have heard today, plus your experience of dealing with multiple events in your countries and through other programs that you have been involved in. What we are trying to identify, what are some of those opportunities or what are some of those actions that needs to be undertaken globally, regionally, and nationally at scale that helps build back better, or the readiness to build back better. But I'll let you maybe a few more minutes to think about it. And what I'll do is I'll invite the other 3 colleagues so that they could speak on what was discussed in their sessions. Maybe that will give us a bit more subject matter to come to a conclusion towards to. Maybe I'll start with you, Yuichi, just if you could give us a bit of summary of what was discussed in your parallel session. Can I have the mic here, please? Thank you.
Okay, on behalf of the group talked in Japanese, there are several people, the five, 6 speakers. Then we talked about a little bit of history of the Build Back Better. Although Build Back Better as a terminology in the Sendai appeared in 2015, but before that, there's some efforts already ongoing. Some examples were mentioned, but the Build Back Better became a term in 2015. So that was a very important step forward. Also, after the Indian Ocean tsunami, the President Clinton made a campaign for assisting the Indian Ocean countries. So there are some terminology term used. But now it's becoming a term in 2015. Then the countries advised to implement it in the policy. But whether that is becoming a policy or not, we have to check, and the good practices we have to compile. That's maybe IRP secretary could do. And there's some issues. Although, for example, in Japan, the building code is implemented, but some other countries, like Turkey, when the question from the audience was from UNESCO, talking about question of the building code supposed to be implemented in Turkey, but actually, whether there's a building code, but either implemented or not is a different matter. Yeah. So how we can promote further really this building code to be implemented. That's Japan. There's some way, or if somebody is not doing well, the media is not quiet. So media will say, criticize the company who are not doing the things well. So it's a little bit of the culture of adapting this Build Back Better into the concept. So from concept to the implementation, real implementation is a challenge, and we exchanged some information on the different disaster, including current Noto Peninsula earthquake and tsunami, and Kobe earthquakes and Sendai earthquake and tsunami. So we are comparing it, and this will be available, I heard, through the video in the future, translated in English, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuichi, for that. Definitely, they will be made available, but we just want to take the opportunity to, for everybody to absorb it. If I had to summarize it in a different, actionable way, we need to see if Build Back Better is actually becoming part of policies across countries. Building codes is an example that you gave, whether they're getting implemented in itself, because having codes but getting them implemented is another in itself, and the need to include, promote foster the culture of Build Back Better, through, it could be media, but it could also be through other means and processes in itself. Steve, could I invite you, please?
Thanks, Abhilash. So we had a very fruitful discussion on recovery financing, and I think we had a number of common themes come up across a very diverse group of panelists from the 4 countries. So just to share some of those, I think we discussed the importance of data-informed decision-making and linking that with capacity strengthening for decision-makers, and I think that was some of the enablers. The importance of it being community-owned and led was really underscored, particularly in the recovery, but also the use of the financing and in the arrangements that underpin that. So, so I guess you could refer to it as burden sharing. So it's not just financing coming from the centre, but also looking at where the subnational governments can play a role, locals, private sector, the communities. So, how do you, recognizing, the immense challenges and the limited financing, how do you structure this across all those key players? And linked to that, of course, is partnership. We discussed that as well. On the how and the sources, the role of disaster risk financing strategies was raised, as well as upstream policy settings. And then we also touched a little bit on the Loss and Damage Fund and the Santiago network, although I think we had more questions than answers, but also some lessons, I think, and some perspectives from countries, from existing mechanisms, and how we can, hope that these are addressed in whatever comes out in those new mechanisms. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Can I go back to the room for our colleague Keiko from World Bank, please?
Thank you. For our session, the topic was capacity development and support with uptake of recovery preparedness measures. I think one of the things is that when we say recovery, people think of different things. And so there's the emergency response phase, and then there's a longer-term recovery that follows. So we try to kind of make a distinction between the 2 phases, but without much success, I must say, because of the richness of the topic itself. A lot of things eventually kind of came up, and so we discussed a little bit of everything. And there was a really interesting opening statement, which was that when we talk about capacity, the communities have perhaps become too used to receiving support from outside, and not really developing their own coping capacity, developing the coping capacities. What used to be there before maybe has been eroded because of that. So that was a very profound statement, and but it might be the reality. That was followed by a question from myself asking, is it possible to develop capacity to do a better planning of longer-term recovery? And the long and the short of it is yes, but as it's a very complex issue, we couldn't really come to a conclusion on the how and when. But I think some of the things that were discussed were already mentioned by our previous speakers. Some of the things being the funding mechanism, or whether there's enough funding to really plan ahead. And another comment that came up was, there are things that we can do beforehand. So once we know that a disaster is happening, there could be things that could be discussed beforehand, knowing the estimated impact. But the World Bank was mentioned, unfortunately, that we do not really provide enough in terms of anticipatory action financing. So, knowing what's going to happen, is there anything that can be done to put in place before the event happens that can prepare the communities to be able to cope. And so that's kind of the capacity development, the broader capacity development issue that was discussed. So we went into so many different directions, and we really obviously couldn't come to a conclusion of clear-cut conclusion. But I think financing was one of the issues, and another thing was I think a lot of countries, panelists on our panel, were mentioning the fact that training is being done at the national level as well as sub-national level and the community level to ensure that people are aware that they have to have their own coping capacity, and training is being provided to raise awareness of those things that need to be developed in terms of coping capacities. So I think yes, it was a really rich discussion. I probably haven't done justice to the discussion, but I'll still stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Definitely, capacity is one of those discussions that could have many aspects and dimensions to it. But maybe this is where I come back to my panel. You were in some of those rooms, and you got a summary of what was discussed, plus what was discussed earlier in the day itself. I want your help here, because tomorrow there is also the steering committee meeting of the IRP and all its partners. And taking into context of what was discussed, what Paul presented earlier in the morning of what are some of the findings from the midterm review, but also what member states are saying as some of the challenges with Build Back Better and some of the actions that needs to be taken. It's not possible that everything can be done at the same point of time, but there has to be a stepping stone, as we go in the journey. And you are at the forefront of it at the country level. You are tackling this. So maybe I'll start from you, Andrew, and then come towards Mr. Ahmed here, if that's okay. If you can help us distill a bit on how do we go ahead on this. Another tough question.
It's a tricky one. It does strike me, if I again reflect on my Australian experiences, a couple of things that I would call out. One is we've all gone through COVID. So it's an observation around the fact that emergency management, and in Australia, the COVID response went right through all government, all community. And when we think in Australia what was achieved in COVID, it was a real life case of everyone being effectively in emergency management. So to your point about how you actually incorporate and broaden this agenda across government, I think some of the examples through COVID where it was forced on us is actually highly relevant. The other comment I'd make, and I've heard it at various points over the day, is climate adaptation versus emergency management. If you look at the Venn diagram, it's basically 90%, I suspect, the same. And again, I think from an emergency management space, the opportunity is to partner up with that agenda around climate adaptation, because if you think around how do we actually tap into additional funding, there's a lot of funding will inevitably go into climate adaptation in an infrastructure space, in an economic space, in a social space. So again, when I'm looking, and this is a real world issue in Australia at the moment, is how you bring those agendas together, because there is significant overlap. So I guess I'm just kind of calling out, yes, we can look back in within the EM, emergency management space, but I think we need to work more broadly. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. Vasiti, please.
Thank you, Moderator. Just very much aligning to what Andrew had mentioned earlier regarding the demarcation, and this is what I said as well in my previous speak, is the fragmentation between climate change and disaster risk reduction, or in this case, that falls within emergency management. The need to remove silo and the need for conversation to happen, it also needs to start at the higher level, at the UN level. You need to start having conversations with UNFCCC to see where the synergies are. I remember one time I was talking to a friend of mine who's a chair for SEEDS in New York. And the moment we were talking about loss and damage, the moment I brought up disaster, and I said, oh, you know, when you think about loss and damage, that's just, you know, moving into my space. So really, we were talking about the trust fund. The moment I said disaster, she was like, no way, no way, no way loss and damage is going to sit on the disaster, because of the language that they have fought for over the years to actually have it to what it is, right? So as much as for us, it's like you're doing our work, but it's also because they've done the extra yard. So the need for integration at that level really needs to happen. And I just wonder, for me, I think the sentence that probably would leave when it comes to scaling up is SEEDS, or in this case Fiji, or SEEDS, because Mafo is also looking at me. For us in the Pacific, we should not be part of an output or an outcome. When you're developing a project in the Pacific, we should be part of the process. I've sat with donors in a room and partners, and they come and say, oh, we think this will work for you. No, that will never work for me. Okay? If you want to develop something in the Pacific or in Fiji, we have to be part of the process. Right. We have to do it with you to get to the outcome, because we're talking about coping mechanism, we're talking about community resilience. That's what we bring into the project. So please, if you have projects that you think that will work in the Pacific, don't come to me when your project is ready to be implemented. Come to me when your project is ready for us to put it together before it is implemented. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you for that. Susan, please.
Okay, well, maybe the context, national context, may be completely different from your cases. That since the disaster is such a common affair amongst our government, it's already sort of embedded with the regular operation amongst all the line ministries and governmental offices. So even the response are sort of almost the ministry have to offer the human force to be a part of the response headquarters, and also almost every single ministry have to secure the budget for their own DRR related measures and things. So. As I said in the first question, for us the biggest challenge is really for the projection of mega disasters. We involve the researchers for the projection and the damage estimation of some of the really closely anticipated disaster, especially earthquakes. So the real challenge for us is disseminating information. Frankly, including all the sort of quantitative estimation of actual damage we expect, and that sort of have all that sort of political, administrative, including local administrative stakeholders and even the citizens to have some thoughts on what we could do to just reduce the damages. So. Probably at the real political level, the real problem is really secure the budget, because we really need a huge chunk of budget in the fiscal finance of the government. But that's how sort of we are struggling at this moment also. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you. The challenges we faced in Nigeria in 2022, we had the worst flood ever in the history in Nigeria. The flood affected over 4 million people. Over 665 people. We lost over 665 people. Over 900,000 hectares of farmland affected. But what helped us build back better for that 2022 flood was that there was early warning. What I mean by early warning, earlier enough. We knew. Nigeria Meteorological Agency released their seasonal climate prediction earlier. Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency also released their own warning earlier. So with that, we were able to alert all states and share with them this information. We wrote to them a couple of times, all the state governors, so that that information can get to community level. Then after that, we wrote to the Governors Forum, where we have about 36 governors together to brief them about what we have. Because after the seasonal climate prediction and annual flood outlook, because flood is the major disaster in Nigeria, we did risk mapping, identifying areas that will be hit by flood. When we identified those areas, we shared the risk mapping with the governors, showing them communities, local governments that will be hit by flood. So that was very, very, very helpful. It reduced quite a lot. It made a lot of impact. And another challenge I think we have is building capacity across all boards. That is at the national, at the state, and at the local government. You can develop a capacity in the local government or in the state, and maybe after a change of government or anything, those appointments are basically mostly political. So then there'll be another gap. So we are going back to the drawing board now. This time around, we're going to do capacity building, but we're going to do train the trainer, whereby it's going to be the technical people that will be trained. And when we talk about capacity, it's not just education, it's not just knowledge, it's not just manpower, equipment. What I've realized when, if I go to other disaster management agencies in foreign countries, or like if I visit the headquarters maybe here in Japan, you find out that the equipment they have so much equipment, and some of these equipments can be lying there for years without being used. Mm-hmm. A lot of fund is being needed. We have a lot of countries here who need quite a lot in terms of equipment, in terms of capacity, and so many other things. We faced a situation while I was just sitting down there I was just thinking to myself, if what we faced when the Sudan war broke out, if it happened to some of these countries, how will they cater for that? The population of Nigeria in Sudan is more than many of the countries here. Nigerian language is being even spoken in Sudan. We have a population, student population that we evacuated is over 3,000. Getting the logistics of how to move them out of Sudan was a major challenge for us. It was a very, very, very big challenge for us. We had to move to Egypt, assemble and look at even practical funding of how to remove people was a problem. How to get aircrafts to bring them out, because airlines were no more going to Sudan to evacuate people. We have to start thinking of ways to get how to get fund to people. I can remember while trying to work out all those modalities, I was just stepped out to print some documents. I got the ambassador of Sudan, ambassador of Egypt, all to be part of the program. Just stepped out and I've exhausted there was no credit in my room, so they locked me out. We had to find so many ways of evacuating people. No airline was willing to go and evacuate people from Sudan. It was a tough challenge, but no life was left behind. We evacuated everybody safe back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I'll again move away from the script. I want to give an opportunity to the steering committee members and the partners of IRP. Some of you may have things to suggest on areas that needs to be focused, like where do we need to invest our joint up efforts in addressing what we have heard throughout the day on some of the challenges and opportunities. And then I'll circle back to you, which would be the last question in itself. And that question, which I can mention in advance, would be, what would be that one thing that you would see the international development partners supporting member states in to address this, if there is any? But I'll come back to you. I'll give them an opportunity. I have my co-chair of IRP, Ron. I have Simonetta from UNEP, Hassan from UNEP, and Steve, Sanjay, Rita, this is the opportunity, what you would like to put forward. Ron, do you want to, or do you want to take the last?
No, I can, I mean, since I have the microphone, I might as well be efficient with it. I think a number of areas have certainly come up over the past few days, but I mean, as I listen to the different presentations and as we reflect on this issue of the complexities in dealing with the agenda of building back better, and in particular monitoring whether the key principles we espouse are being delivered, I think there is more work that we can do in getting our governments to understand and appreciate the potential implications of hazard events, singular or in a cascading context. And I think we're at a stage now with data, big data, tools, better understanding of vulnerability and exposure, where we can do that. I mean, we can certainly do that and begin to look at some of the complex issues, certainly as we heard from SIDS. What is going to be your short, medium, and long-term strategy as you continue to grapple with the limited land space that you're dealing with? What does development in 10, 15 years look like in the context of small island states which have limited resources and capacities? I think that's a conversation we need to get into, and it is going to require, in my mind, the collective of the UN community working with regional institutions, more importantly, and putting governments in the leadership in driving this process. They have to own it. I mean, it can't be owned by the external actors. It has to be owned by the national and regional government. But we must support that process and bring the resources, the cases, the experiences to that space. So that's something that I'm seeing emerging as we discuss.
Thank you, Ron. Simonetta? Thanks. You have 2 mics. Okay, 1 mic.
Thank you very much. And I'm trying not to repeat what Ronald just said, but to add on it. And for me, it was the first time that I attended the IRP this year. I was present 2 years ago, but online. And it was incredibly interesting and inspiring to hear all the experiences from the countries. And I think forums like this are extremely important for this experience exchange, to learn from each other. And I think the highlight that I'm taking away is really the awareness and the recognition of the importance of community empowerment and community ownership. And I really liked very much what Vasiti said just before, that when outsiders come to the regions, to the areas that are hit by disasters for recovery, this part, the suffering people are not the output. They are actually the owners of the process. And I think it's really key to recognize this ownership, this really participatory approach that has to be led by the communities to really recover properly from disasters, and not recover for the short term, but for the long term. And citing Charles, it's really important to mainstream this resilience in the long-term recovery into the development process, because we'll keep on being hit by natural disasters, by extreme weather events that turn into these disasters. It's our inability to adapt and our insufficient resilience to those extreme weather events that make us so vulnerable. So thank you very much for the discussions today.
Thank you, Simonetta. Hassan, would you?
Thank you very much. It's also my first time to be here in person. I think it's been very fruitful and rich discussions, and being in person has, I think, helped a lot to meet and to exchange and focus on these issues. I think I'll also pick up on also what has been said about ownership and capacity building, particularly at regional level. I think the pace and frequency of disasters mean we'll have less roster of pool of people who will be able to mobilize and support this. So it will be important to build these regional capacities or regional organizations in areas and maybe regions that might not have these regional disaster management capacities. I think we heard from Southern Africa and Malawi a lot of about these being shared transboundary disasters, also in relation to Iraq, and also I think in Nigeria as well. I mean, in the case of the floods, and I think here one thing that also strikes is that how this whole building back better can also be integrated into regional water management organizations or basin organizations, where, because a lot of these disasters seems to be hydrological related, and on the issue of compartmentalization or of this work, how we can better integrate the disaster dimension in integrated water resources management at regional level. Then I think another point is on the solutions. I think that a lot of speakers spoke on the need to identify solutions, practical solutions on the ground on what we mean by building back better, and if there can be, we can have more maybe case studies or hard examples of that can better picture what is meant by that. Also, from an environmental perspective, looking at nature-based solutions or circular technologies, also in the recovery process itself, and reducing the environmental footprint and solutions that of the recovery would be good to document, and then also to get acknowledgement from the IRP on these. Thanks.
Thank you, Hussein. Steve, would you have anything further to add?
No, I'm okay.
No. Sanjay, please.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I was associated with IRP about 15 years ago, first time. And I was just reflecting today, looking at all the panel discussions and hearing everyone. That time, 15 years ago, there was a lot of talk of response. And then we had to keep trying to steer the conversation away from response, and let's talk about recovery, which is a different thing. Today, I was very happy. Of course, my engagement has not been consistent throughout the years, but now today, after many years, I see there was no talk of response. It was all talk about recovery. So I'm very happy to see that over time, this the concept of build back better and recovery has become more more clear. So that's very encouraging. At the same time, I was also hearing a lot of requests for more capacity building, for training, and I think it is a major gap area which needs to be addressed. But the way we go forward, I think we can discuss further, but it has to be a partnership. But if you see all the partners in this room, all of us put together, what we do for recovery planning is a drop in the ocean. So it has to be, of course, all hands on deck kind of approach, but in that partnership, the lead has to be, and that has come out in other discussions also, has to be the national governments. And it has to be a partnership with the national governments. And one last point I would say about the training and capacity development is keep it simple. Let's not get lost in concepts and concepts and ideas. Let's keep it practical, keep it simple, because this is the time for action. We don't have enough time left. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Rita, please.
Thank you. I think I'll just again congratulate particularly all the panelists for all these whole day and a bit of yesterday as well about bringing to attention the complexities of doing a recovery process. I think we've gone through a range of subjects about engaging communities to finding finance for it, to understanding what it means to build back better, to what it means to take the government leadership and what could be partners' role. So we've been through that range. So I think that recognition itself that recovery is a long-standing, complex process is very, very critical, and that has been established well through this 1 or 2 days. So for me, that's a really positive point. Because people almost talk about recovery preparedness in the same breath that they speak about emergency preparedness, not. And I think that recognition is very important. Emergency is what you prepared for immediate, 3 months to 6 months, but recovery is what you prepared for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. So the planning cycles are entirely different. So that for me is very enlightening. The second point I think is important and understand, that was spoken in the last session is about how local people need to understand the risks and take action on it. There's only so much anyone else can do, an outsider can do, be it a partner, be it a state government, or be it even a national government. So sometimes where there is a federal state, a federal government, there's only so much even the national government can ask the state government to do. And that's the experience we are coming from India. It's a state subject, so there's some policy guideline that can come generally, but most of it has to be developed by that certain separate state. So that's the second point I want to make. The third, I think, while capacity building and trainings are important, what Sanjay just said now is the time for action. And with that time for action, the recognition that there are so many things to be done, but incrementally things can be done, doesn't have to start all at the same go. And so given the limitations in terms of resources and capacities and people sitting around this room, we can start somewhere. And so this is what we need to do in terms of understanding where exactly is the urgency. Is it in recovery assessment? Is it recovery institution? Is it recovery planning? Is it recovery financing? Is it monitoring and programming and implementation? If these are the 5 or 7 areas of recovery, where do we actually focus first on? And then how we take it from there. So having that, a little bit of that written down somewhere as to what exactly we want to do and how we go about it, actually would be one great step in moving forward towards recovery preparedness plan. And then the other thing, I think today and yesterday, some people made comments about all the developing economies have had this recovery preparedness plan, like US and New Zealand and parts of Australia. That's not quite true. India has had its own recovery preparedness plan. Indonesia has been an example in this region where they follow through very systematic processes for undertaking recovery, informed by assessments, informed by their own budgeting and planning, without any international assistance or international resources allocation. So there are good examples, case studies in this region and elsewhere which can be drawn on for learning, and that's the other point. These forums provide the opportunity for actual exchange of experiences, of good practices, and therefore next time we have an IRP forum, we should talk about more. Please share good practices, because then those are the things that might help in transferring. And on the role of the UN system, the World Bank and the ADBs, and our other partners who are here in this room as IRP steering members, a lot has been written in terms of what could be done in terms of recovery. A lot of sectoral guidance is already developed. And I think the uptake of this is something that we hope the national governments will take lead on, because these remain shelved documents, globally drawing on various experiences, but this is something that can be presented to different countries as the need arises. So one of the outcomes of, I hope, the IRP forum will be some sort of understanding of what we did in terms of next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. So I'll come to Nishikawa-san and then to Sujit, and then back to the panel.
Thank you for giving this opportunity. And I'm extremely happy to be here today as one of the I'll say, initiators of this IRP, and back in 2005. Now, listening to the discussions today, I have one kind of a suggestion or a comment. That is to have more risk information included or incorporated in regional planning and city planning. Because, well, we're speaking about build back better. That is a process which suddenly starts after an event. But usually, in many growing cities, there are regional development plans or city planning. And if there is to be more, say, risk-sensitive or risk-informed urban development plans in place, even after a big event, that kind of a process can be better included to have more risk resilience component in the Build Back Better urban planning or regional planning. Also, for example, in many island development countries, there are investments for tourism industries. If the investment of these tourism industries are more risk sensitive, there would be less risk of, I'll say, economic damage by disasters, and thus avoid, I'll say, there was one expression that there's a disaster after disaster. But if we can try to control the damage by better risk-informed investment, that might be another solution. So my suggestion is that let us try to influence the long-term regional development or urban planning to be more risk-informed. And also, there was a discussion about ownership. In many, I would say, democratic countries, the city planning or the regional planning has the voices of the local stakeholders. And if the local stakeholders, when they discuss their future, if they can think or consider risks, that might be a better process to include Build Back Better in the long term of the regional development process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Sujit, to you, and then we'll be back to the panel.
Thank you, Abhilash. Well, a lot has been actually said and very eloquently said to set the context for our next discussion, perhaps on what is to be done. And, how do we scale up, if there is a need to scale up or not. I think at the end of the day, we should really collectively think that how we are really serving countries. Are we fit for purpose as a recovery platform or a partnership that brings together all different partners with their strengths? That are we really collectively supporting countries based on the needs or based on the demands? It should be contextualized. I think in the first session I heard that don't come with a project or something that is already cooked up and you come and tell us that you do it. Rather, you develop it with us. And that's, I think, should be the approach. Where is the gap? We have to first really identify with the countries. And then, are we really fit for purpose as a international recovery partnership? That are we able to provide that support to countries? I think we heard a lot from different sessions about what are the needs, what are the gaps. There is an assessment being, I think, is going on. It's still open, I understand, which we will ask more countries. So certainly we'll come up with the gaps, challenges, and so on. But what is really important is, as a partnership, as collectively number of agencies coming together, to see that are we really putting all our efforts to support the countries? And as I think, as we heard from colleagues, the demand of capacity building, training, it's there. So I think we need to just step up, put a very clear, tangible, practical plan, that we should be collectively able to do these capacity buildings, trainings, or assessments, whatever is required. And that should be, I think, what Sanjay was mentioning, keep it simple, keep it practical, because it has to be actionable. And we should not, I mean, IRP as a forum, I think, is our partnership is really matured with last 19 years. So moving beyond just information sharing, exchange of experiences, which is also quite important, we need to have now actions collectively that will allow us to really fulfill those gaps which we heard from the MTR assessment. Now all these assessments that really alludes to those glaring gaps. If we can collectively do it, because I'm sure, and other members in the IRP will certainly agree with that, one agency or one organization within the partnership cannot do it, cannot fulfill all those gaps. So I think it's a question to all of us, all the members, that how do we take it forward, how do we practically put a plan that we can really deliver for the countries.
Thank you, Sujit, and thanks to everyone, all of the IRP members for their inputs and suggestions. We're not taking any questions from the floor for this session, because that's not what it was intended for. And I'll close this session by taking your suggestions. You heard the partners, agencies involved who have been working with you for quite some time. You know what the challenges are. What's beneficial is for the forum and the partners in itself to get a bit of your suggestion. What do you think? That's one action that definitely the IRP and the members should be taking forward in assisting countries in scaling up, Build Back Better. Mr. Ahmed, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you very much. Before answering that, I would first like to thank IRP and all partners. And also I'd like to thank the Japanese government, most sincerely. Before I answer this question, that 2022 flood I mentioned, I spoke about, when it floods and you have mixture of good water, sewage water, and everything, Japanese government, through JICA, provided us with 6 water purifying equipments. Those equipments saved us a lot. They're very, very heavy equipment. We must say a big thank you. This is how partnership is supposed to be. This is how we're supposed to partner and assist each other. This collaboration, this partnership should be strengthened. It's not just about capacity, it's about giving us even equipments. These 6 equipments I've just mentioned, we don't have one. You gave us 6. And that was what we used in giving people portable drinking water to drink to survive. I think I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Amongst all of these comments, I particularly echoed the comment or suggestion from Dr. Nishikawa that especially one thing coming up in my mind in terms of a collective or joint effort through the platform is probably risk analysis. The cycle of DRL, that normally recovery needs to be followed by the mitigation of future disaster. And that involves sort of updating or renewal of the existing risk analysis to prepare for future disaster. Then in that regard, probably there should be a huge room amongst the countries in the same region for jointly do the risk analysis with those who have a sort of similar disaster profiles, perhaps. To use that sort of maybe limited, resources and expertise, perhaps. That's maybe one of the things I'm coming at. Yeah, but it would be great that we could. There should be a lot to work together in some of the member countries, I hope. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I just agreeing to everything that has been shared. But the one thing that probably I could just add as my final comment for this conference is there's a need. This is good. We are here. We are sharing experiences, best practices, but we need to bring other game changers in the room. We cannot just be talking about risk analysis, risk profiling, without having the climate change people in this room as well. We need to start bringing these people into the room and having the discussions with them. It's, again, a very silo environment when you do sit with them. But I hope that one of the key outcomes from this is you got to have that level in. And to take that, what I just said, into action. If any of you are interested, so come next week, we are looking at developing Fiji's joint action plan with climate change. What I am seeing, which I hope will be shared once that document is complete, is the overlap between DRR and CCA. And this is what we need to identify, and this is why we need to bring other people in the room so that that discussion where we can overlap, where we can map the overlap, where we can map where the overlaps are and synergize together as a team as we move forward. Because at the end of the day, we are serving the same people, the same community, the same country. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
I'll keep this, excuse me, I'll keep this brief. It strikes me that what we're trying to do is increase the slice of the pie that goes to the expenditure around resilience. The level of sophistication to defend that and justify it will increase as well. And in Australia, we've got some data, but I think the level of analysis around cost-benefit analysis is going to have to grow significantly. And certainly from an Australian perspective, that's going to be one of the key takeaways I take from this session, because we've all got our finance treasury colleagues who are always looking for reasons not to support something, and that's their job. And if we don't have some really credible, hard-nosed arguments about why you would actually spend that extra 5, 10 or 20%, we're going to struggle to get that additional funding we need to build back better.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to everyone. I ran off the script, so apologies for that, and thanks for bearing with me. And thanks to everyone in the room. Ron has a comment, because I was going to close it, Ron. Yeah, please. I was saving 3 minutes.
Vasiti has provoked me to comment on this, because it's not the first. She's echoed this, and I share her challenge, you know. And I think the starting point should be bottom up. You know, I participated in the transitional committee conversation on loss and damage, and what we refer to as the climate change community. The people there were people from the foreign affairs sector and from the finance sector. So these are the people who have been historically, and you know, we're here because the people who are looking at the issues around risk and vulnerability, and I'm not only talking about the NDMOs, I'm talking generally if we look at the challenge, we're not the people who are engaged at the table in that whole climate discourse. So there's a disconnect, and what is happening is we're seeing increasingly these silos which are driven primarily by the finance. It's not being driven by the technical expertise. And there's a great capture going on. Even in the space of early warning systems, where climate finance is financing early warning systems, which historically was the larger DRR oversight in terms of the big picture. Right? It's not about Met, you talked about the last man and community. How do we change that? Because fundamentally the issue around resources and how we apply resources in tackling these challenges, including recovery, and we're talking about the loss and damage fund, is going to require us to fix what is broken nationally. We can't do it globally because the architecture globally is so set, but has to be shifted by, I would say, national governments who are going into the space in a unified way to say, hey, you know, we're not disparate communities, we're actually one community that is focusing on these issues around risk and drivers. They're the same risk and drivers and root causes. Adaptation is a form of risk reduction, right? So we need to begin to break down, this fragmentation in the risk language, break down this capture, and bring back efficiency in terms of how we are resourcing our national actors to get on with the business. And the way to do that, I think it has to be bottom up. So each of us will have to engage that dialogue as you're doing nationally, and then bring that to the global space to get the global actors to get our act together. So I was compelled to make that submission on behalf of Vasiti, who has brought this up, quite significantly over the past day.
Thank you, Ron. And I'll let you continue the discussion after the close of this meeting, if there's further to do that. I'm not going to also summarize, because this was not just a panel of 4 members. This was all of you contributed to it, so I'm not going to do justice to itself. So I'm not going to summarize. I'm going to close this session asking all of you to thank my panelists, but also to thank everybody who spoke and contributed to itself. Thank you.